Okay, we're recording. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Moisha here again. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps. And if you want to help me, that's what you got to do. Right? I didn't want to miss out on this opportunity today. Hopefully we don't get any interruptions. I don't know if you saw my last video about the review of the Get Refuser, but that was an interesting video. Or rather, an interesting story. Doesn't mean that I was interested because I was doing the video. I mean, maybe it might be the most boring video you've ever watched, because I was involved. But anyway, I've got a nice opportunity here today. I don't know if many people would know this video about this video, but I came across it because I had something come to mind. It floated to the surface about a week ago. And when I was out walking, I had my headsets on, not these ones, another walking headsets, a Bluetooth to my mobile phone, and I was listening to this, the beginning of it, and I thought, oh, I'm going to listen to the rest of this with the Streamlabs video, and I'm going to do a reaction to it. And I'll tell you why. It's like, most of my life, I always believed in Hashem, in God. But I didn't know where he was. I was looking for him. Oh no, I wasn't even looking for him. He was there somewhere. You know what I mean? Everybody either believed in him or they didn't believe in him, but nobody really ever discussed him. Not in my circles, anyway. We might refer to him from time to time, take his name in vain exactly when you shouldn't do. And but there came a point in my life where I hit a low, a big low, and when you look around, there comes that moment in life when you look for help from others and nobody can help. Not that they want to help, or can't, sometimes they can't help. Sometimes they don't even know that you need help because your ego or your pride prevents you from letting people know that you're in a very low place. It's a what they call a busha, a shame, an embarrassment, to reveal that you're in a low place. Although I really didn't have any problems letting people know how miserable I was. They could tell by looking at my face. But I would run around in circles in a verbal. I think they call it pilpulim. Verbal dueling, if you like, trying to convince everybody that I was miserable, and they would go, "Oh, we can't help you." They couldn't have, but deep down I was hurt, sore, sorry, depressed, down, deflated. We're in a really bad place. I'll get there from time to time. I reckon a lot of people do, but they don't reveal it. So we've got to be mindful of that. Lots of people get down, In my case, really, when you would cried wolf too often, nobody really could or would help you. So you were left to appeal to the only entity that you thought might help, and that was Hashem, God. Call out to him. And then as time went by, that kind of appeal or call for help opens doors. You don't realise it at the time, but there's a door opens, and you go down that door, through that door, and down a path, and you find yourself being drawn in, or welcomed in is the right word, welcomed in, to find out more about the things that you can do to make yourself feel happy, to get rid of the pain. This is in halacha, this is in Judaism, this is in what we call the derech, the path that you go down. Bit by bit, you learn little few things here and there, and eventually you get to the point where certain things kind of work, and you don't know why they work, but they kind of resonate, and they kind of like float your boat in some. You might attend a class or a lesson, what they call a shiurim, a lesson. What's got my phone? Like, can you hear dingling? Because I've got sales coming through. There was one rabbi that in particular down in London, the JLE. I don't think the JLE is open for people like me anymore. It's targeted at younger people. Fine, I can understand that. But at the time, the door was wide open to somebody like me. Or at least the door was open and I walked straight in with and invited myself. That's another story. But I went down there, and down to the Golders Green JLE, and I found myself listening to some what I didn't realise at the time, but turned out to be some great names, like Rabbi Tats, who's a Kabbalist. I didn't know at the time. He's a little guy, white beard, small, South African guy, living in London. Been here for a good time, and was a doctor, specialist doctor, but had gone become a rabbi, and he had several shears. And the one I listened to was one night. It was on a Motor Shabbos. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. No, it was earlier than that. It's about midnight, and it was called Happiness. I thought, oh, well, it was so miserable. I thought, I'll listen to this then. So I picked this shear, Happiness. Did it wake me up or what? I jumped in my car about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I drove down to the JLE in London, and I got there at about 6:30 in the morning, davened, and went and attended his shir. There's a few other things happened before then, but wow. Even if the shearing or the lessons don't cheer you up initially, right? They give you something to think about. Makes you think deeply about something that you would never ever normally know, or even think about. It would never be on your radar. Anyway, as time went by, you learn certain things about happiness, about being happy, and you find out that you might have heard it in the past, but it doesn't register. You don't think about it because if you're a secular individual and you just go down a particular path that's away from God or nowhere near God, you don't know anything about Him. You think you do, but you know nothing. You absolutely know nothing, and it's not what you think. But the path I went down and what I learned is like such an eye opener. It was revelation in some respects. I always thought that Israel, for instance, was all about oranges. It's stupid, naive thing, Jaffa oranges. Because when I was a kid at school, they used to turn up with a crate of oranges. I think it was on Yom Ha'atzmaut, on the Israeli independence, if that's what it is, in Yom Ha'atzmaut, I think it is. And I said, oh, oranges. Every year following year, oranges. Another more oranges. I suppose that's all they had to give. They couldn't give us a barrel of oil because they didn't have any. So if they did, you'd get a barrel of oil. But you didn't. We had oranges, so we used to get oranges, Jaffa oranges, big ones, huge things. Anyway, then you learn that you've got to serve him, you've got to serve Hashem, you've got to find him, and you've got to serve him. And if you find him, it means he stands to reason. You've got to look for him, right? So we got to look for him. I'm looking for him everywhere, looking for him. It's like playing hide and seek. In fact, all the while it was right there, right in front of me, and I didn't realise until many years later. I thought, where have you been all my life? Here he is, right in front of me. There he was. But the thing is, he there's a requirement of the Jew. You've got to serve Hashem. Serve, like service, like servant. You've got a servant. Service is, he's going to shul and davening and praying and being in a community with Kehillah and congregation. You've got to come together and congregate and serve him, right? And you serve him in some ways by singing to him, And but servants, you have a servant. A servant's like a slave or a hired hand or something like that. But you've got to be a servant to him. Servant, can you ring the bell? Ring the bell and get the servant to come and clean up this mess, please. But can you get the servant to make my bed? Can you get the servant to do my ironing? It's a servant, isn't it? A servant is somebody that does all these things for you. So Hashem wants the Jew to be his servant. Chutzpah, really, isn't it? Not only listen, he's entitled to, isn't he? At the end of the day, I mean, he's the top man or the lad. He's the top lad. He has the right to tell you to serve him. I suppose we also have the discretion or the right to refuse it. But as it stands, the requirement is to serve him, and not only to serve him, right, but to serve him with joy. We have to do it with what they call simcha. We have to be happy while we're doing it. And there it is, isn't it? When you're down and you're depressed, there's no better way of actually lifting yourself out of that mood, but to serve him, to do something with happiness, and then you'll be happy. Why? Well, if I say to you right now, whatever you do, don't think of a pink elephant. Don't do it. I don't want you to think that that pink elephant with the big long trunk, you know, that one with the pink trunk, pink one, maybe floating up in the sky, a big floating pink elephant. Don't think of it. By virtue of the fact that you're talking about it, being told not to think about it is neither here nor there. The fact that I've mentioned it, it brings it to mind, doesn't it? So I suppose if you're being told to serve Hashem, who does he think he is asking me to serve him? And not only to serve, but to serve him with joy. It is enough to make you laugh. But you know that's the requirement. And as time goes by, you learn that it's forbidden to be sad. But I'm sad. I'm depressed. I forbid you. Not allowed to be, because we have to serve him with joy. We have to be happy always, always happy. We don't have problems. We have happiness. And you know, you look at people who seem to be able to switch on the happiness just like that. It takes time to learn it, to train. You've got to train yourself to switch your mind from the zone of miserable sorrow to happiness. You've got to move away from the. There's a song, the Saggy Bottom Boys. I think it goes, "I am a man of constant sorrow." You might have heard of it. It's a bit of something crass in America, you know. Sorrow. We can't be like that. We can't be miserable, moody. We've got to be happy. We've got to be happy. We've got to serve Hashem with happiness and joy. And so, you know, you look around and you see that some of the big greats in current times, you know, they talk about it all the time. And the more I went in the search for this happiness, these shiurim on happiness, I found there's quite a lot of them. And listening to these guys, these guys, they make you feel good. It's good to listen to them. Sometimes you don't know what the hell they're going on about. Do you know what I mean? But as time goes by bit, you find out that what they're saying resonates, even to the secular Jew, even to the secular individual who knows nothing. It doesn't matter. You know, if you a little bit of persistence, push yourself forward a little bit, you can tune into what they're saying, and if you don't, you clarify it, and then you go, and they will tell you things that no one else will ever tell you, because they are concerned with what they call the truth. Emet, it's called MS, the Torah, truth, right? And you know, if you was to sit down and be patient and read the Chumash, you wouldn't necessarily see the truth. It's there. They have to bear. That's what they do for a living. They've learned it, and they've gone deep down. There's several levels, and they extract the truth and they present it to you in a way that you can kind of understand. You know, because our limited brains as secular individuals. Okay, you might know your football in your Tottenham Hotspur. You might know every single goal that's ever been scored in every football player that's ever played for them in every tournament they've ever won. But the reality is that some of these rabbis also know that. But they know more, right? Some of them don't even know about football. They don't even know what a kudder regal is. They're not interested. But what they do know is some things that we don't know about life. And there's one rabbi who, when I listen to him, he basically, he makes me feel happy. Because some of he tends to start off his speaking shiurim, his lessons, with a joke. They make me chuckle. They lift me, my spirits. But he's basically. I'm going to play some stuff to you. Not the humorous stuff. This is a serious interview of him, and it gives you an idea of who he is and what his background is. So we're going to listen to it together, because I want to go. I've listened to the first 10 or 15 minutes. I want to listen to it again. But the rest of it, the 40, 50 minutes I haven't listened to, we'll listen to it together. And if there's any words that they used or any observations that I make, I'll try and clarify it. But I did go on to the actual business or the website or the publication, if you want to call it. It's called Mishpacha, and Mishpacha means family, right? And it's a Haredi publication. It's a religious publication. An observant, strictly, they're serious dudes. You know what I mean? They don't mess about, these people. They love you, they will help you, but there are red lines for them, and you have to be respectful of that. But no making fun of them. They are who they are, and I'm going to try and query and clarify some things along the way. But you know, I don't want to actually take liberties without approaching them first to see if I could review this under a reaction video. So I wrote to them and I asked them if I could do this, and they wrote back saying, because I said, can I have your blessing, basically, because they do say somewhere in their website that we can lift articles and put them on your own website and that kind of thing. But I didn't want to be presumptuous and assume that I could do what I'm going to do. So I wrote to them and asked them if I could do this reaction video, and they wrote back to say, what do you mean a reaction video? What's a reaction video? And so I sent them a link to the Get, the Get refuser, to see. I don't know if they would watch that or approve of it, but it is a case that is in the public domain, and this technically is in the public domain. So I can't see how they would have a problem with it, and they haven't replied to me since. So I thought, well, I'm going to make the video anyway. Not if they say to me, no, we don't want this kind of video on YouTube or something like that, then I'll just take it down. However, it's going to be positive. I like this guy. You might, I'm sure you've heard of him. If you haven't heard of him, you might have seen some of his jokes. But let's listen to him together because we'll learn something. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Rabbi YY Jacobson. Right, here we go. This is the magazine. This is not him. This is the guy that's interviewing him. And it's called Take Two with Rabbi YY Jacobson. You can listen to, you can download the audio version. But Take Two is like a brand, because this guy has got dozens of other videos in Mishpacha. If you're interested in this kind of thing, go along to the website www.mishpacha.com. It's got lots of articles on there, and it's a UK. I believe it's a UK publication. I think it is. I'm not too sure. I'm going to learn more about it. But you've got the JC. That's like very secular, very left wing almost. Think of this in terms of religious and right wing, but they won't necessarily concern themselves with right wing. They would say they're more centre and they want to be right wing, right? Excuse me. So here we go. Let's see what happens. Okay. Oh! Sorry about that. Okay.
Welcome back to Mishpacha Magazine's Take Two, where the names, the figures, the faces, the ideas, the interviews on the pages of the magazine come to life for deeper discussion. Rabbi YY Jacobson certainly
Yisrael something.
There isn't anybody watching this show now who hasn't seen a clip, heard a Devat Torah, heard an idea, seen a vart printed from Rabbi Jacobson over the last 10, 15 years, and said, wow, I need to hear more from this man. So it's a schus, a real schus, and anybody who knows how difficult it was to actually get him to come into studio today knows how overwhelming it is to actually be sitting across Rabbi Jacobson. Welcome, thank you for coming in.
That's it.
Thank you for the honor.
It's you're a busy man.
Thank you for the privilege.
This was quite the feat getting you to come in, and we don't take it for granted. Rabbi Jacobson, forgive my blunt style for asking, what is it that you do?
Now you sound like one of my children.
Take
who
it as
for
a
years have
compliment.
been asking me, Tati, what do you do for a living?
What is it for a living? You created a role. Let's go into Lubavitch, where things are shlichus. So I'm a shliach here, and there's a shliach to different geographical locations. There's shlichum to cyberspace. What is your shlichus? What is your role? What is that you do that you see yourself as your role?
Great question. By Jews, I think we respond to questions with stories. So when I was a young child, it was one Shabbos afternoon, and I was standing at a Shabbos afternoon Farbrengen gathering of the Lubavitcher Rebbe of blessed memory. There were maybe 5,000 or 6,000 men in the room, and he suddenly turned to me and he asked me a question in Yiddish that I'll never forget. He pointed his finger at me and he said, "Von wann weißt du, als da Welt?" How do you know that the universe exists? Nobody ever asked me such a question. How do I know the world exists? Besides, I wasn't listening to his talk. It was deep, intricate sichos and maimarim and explanations and shiurim. I was doing some other things. I was a little kid. I didn't know what to say. How do I know the world exists? But now there's 6,000 eyes looking at me. The Rebbe is waiting for an answer. 15 seconds that seemed like eternity. And I wasn't answering. All I was thinking is, live and let live. Move on. Talk. I'm not disturbing you. Don't disturb me. But then with a big smile, I guess, he felt he had to answer for me. So he said, so this child answers in Yiddish. He said, Entveter, this boy, this young man answers. You know how I know the world exists? Weil the Torah hebt sich an mit Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz. The beginning of the whole Torah is in the beginning Hashem created heaven and earth. And then he went on. So from a pedagogical point of view, it was a wise move because the next Shabbos I was listening from beginning to end because I didn't want to be again caught.
Was that a big story? Was it a big thing to be singled
It
out
was
by
very
the Rebbe?
unusual, very unusual. In 40, 50 years, it was very, very rare.
For the Rebbe to point at a child.
Anybody, at anybody. He had his style, he would talk for many hours, so this was very rare. As I got older, I wondered, what was this all about? Today, I look back and I say, perhaps it was some form of a mission statement to be able to help people from all backgrounds, all persuasions, all over the world, to be able to see themselves and the universe from the perspective of Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'sa'aretz. It's really what I try to do, to try to help empower people to see themselves as ambassadors of infinity, as divine ambassadors of love, light, hope, authenticity, and healing.
Okay, it's quite the mission statement, but on a very practical level, the person has to get from point A to point B, right? You can't go tell your mother when you're 17, I'm going to be an ambassador of, right?
Infinity.
How does a person, you went from you being the Chayzer of the Rebbe, I think you were following, let's say, the traditional path for somebody who's serious about learning and serious about Chassidus within Lubavitch, right? You were learning, you were writing, you were a Chayzer of the Rebbe's Mamar, and all of a sudden, I wouldn't say you landed on the scene slowly. I certainly was familiar with your father, Oliver Shalom, with the Allgemeinen, with his work, his literary work. So, and I was familiar with your name as well. But one day it just became like your message was everywhere. How did that happen? How did it evolve? Was it a plan? Just take us through the last 20 years.
Yeah, so I don't know
You were
that
a Rav of a shul? Were you a mashpia in a yeshiva? Were you teaching in a classroom? How did you get from point A to where you are now?
Right, so it's a good question, and the truth is I sometimes ask myself the question, even if that sounds a little cliche or dramatic. I never planned on this. This was not the trajectory that I was strategizing about. I never went to a life coach who said, choose this career, and this is how it's going to happen 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. When I was a bacher, yeshiva bacher, I had the privilege of being on the team of what they called chayzrim, oral scribes of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who were responsible to memorize and transcribe many hours of talks for publication over Shabbos and Yom Tov. Of course, there were no recording devices. So I did that, and I did that dutifully for many, many years.
It's quite a daunting task.
It was...
How do you force yourself to memorize something? It's not a trick. You really have to.
No, not a trick at all. And the Rebbe didn't speak for 5 minutes. The Rebbe could give sichos that were an hour, 2 hours, and a farbrengen could go from 3 to 8 hours.
And you would write it down, and the Rebbe would review it himself?
Sometimes he would review it. Most of them he didn't review.
Wow.
He just asked that he should write that it's not reviewed. It's called Bilti Muga. He did not edit it, so people understand.
And did you ever get feedback from the Rebbe?
Yeah, a lot of feedback.
Positive?
Mostly it was feedback of a real critic, meaning critic of the highest caliber, who demanded and saw the potential of writers to be able to try to deliver an impeccable product, at least as far as humans are concerned. Extremely nuanced, extremely focused on accuracy and authenticity and truth and structure and syntax and style.
So you knew if you weren't...
Forgive me, I just got to make a comment on that. Think about it. The Rebbe has given him an instruction to actually record the ongoings of a meeting or a party. The Farbrengen is a party, a celebration of sorts. And he had to write down everything, what was going on, to capture the speech, if you like, in text. To do that, you've got to be constantly focused on and your ears got to be wide open. You've got to be listening. You've got to be writing, and as you're writing it, you're reinforcing it in your own mind. That's why I think that this guy is such a brilliant man, because the Rebbe possibly saw the potential in him, and gave him a mission, or put a thumbprint in his brain from when he was a young kid through to his bachur years. His bachur years is where he's at the yeshiva as a young man and he's learning. he probably listened and absorbed everything that was going on around him like a sponge. Let's carry on anyway.
Doing a good job, you would have known about it. Someone,
yeah, and if your reference to Tosfos was wrong, there had to be footnotes. You know, if the reference to the Rambam or Tosfos or even the Maram Shif or the Bir Hagro was wrong, it was very upsetting to their.
This must have been an impressive team. You must have had yourself and the people around.
Well,
you must
the
have been
chief chayzer is a Jew today in his 90s, Rabbi YY Khan, who was there from 1950. And every few years he would take in a few new Bachrim who he felt were skilled to get involved in this. I have an older brother, Reb Simon, who was involved in this, and he brought me in. So this was a team not of many people, 5, 6 people. It was extremely daunting. I mean, you're talking about Fabrengens that could last between 3 and 7 hours. There could be an hour shir on a Gemara in Zvachim, and then there could be a siyum on Temura or a Hadron on Shas, and then an hour Rashi Sikha and Rambam, and then there's Kabbalah and Zohar and Chassidus, then there's Jewish philosophy, Meir Nevuchim, Chekira, Machshava. Then there were contemporary issues. It was Israel and education and leadership and outreach. And and the flow was just endless, and the Rebbe wasn't a gesture, meaning it's not like half of the speeches were jokes.
Can I ask you a question? I'm curious, just as an aside. Did the Rebbe quote things that were not the traditional Chabad sources, other Hasidic Sfarim, or even not Hasidic Sfarim, often? And if yes, what were they? What would have been the prime? I don't mean Rambam and Rashi. I mean later. Were there any Sfarim that the Rebbe drew on heavily outside of Chabad?
Constantly.
Like
constantly.
What would you say?
I mean, you
Rebbe?
see in the Sikhs. Among the last generations, the biggest was Tzafnas Paneach, the Rogatchover, who he considered one of his teachers and masters. But I remember once Achron Shal Pesach, he did a whole long conversation about a sugya that was in Chidush Reb Chaim Alevi al Rambam.
Do you ever quote the guide?
Yeah,
often.
Very often.
Really?
Yeah, the Bir Hagra and Shulchan Aruch, but also all of his Svarim and Kabbalah. He had a tremendous piyus in the Svarim of the Vilna Gaon and Kabbalah, which is a rare commodity today.
Right.
Sifra Ditznius.
And what about the Rebbes who, so to speak, didn't get along with the Alter Rebbe? Those Rebbes who...
Yeah, he would quote them.
Easily.
I mean, listen, the genre of his Maimarim were Chabad. So the themes were from the Alter Rebbe.
Did the Rebbe ever quote any of the Rebbes?
But Noam Elimelech, huh?
What about the Rebbes in the Chabad dynasty who are not Lubavitch? The other Rebbes?
Like Kapos, Rabbi Strashella, yeah. I heard myself.
Really?
Rabbi Strashella, yeah.
Was there anything that you would say the Rebbe didn't know?
Listen, you remind me now of an amazing story. Gewaldige Meise. This happened at a chasana. The Balatanya was present, and there was a batchen. He was a Chabad chassid. How do you do batchonis in front of your Rebbe, and especially the Balatanya? So he said a little l'chaim. So it should be a little Purim dik, so he would let loose. And everyone is looking. The Balatanya is sitting, and this batchen gets up and he says, Rebbe, after long contemplation, I decided there's no major difference between you and I. Everybody is shocked. He says, Herzog, and I have to say it in Yiddish and then I'll translate. Was ihr weiß nicht, weiß ich euch nicht. What you don't know, I also don't know. Was ich weiß, weißt ihr euch. Whatever I know, you also know. Elamai, so what's the difference? There's a few things that you know that I don't know. But now I want to ask you, the gulf between what you know and what you don't know, isn't it infinite? And the Alter Rebbe started to cry when he said that. So Rabbi Yosef Albo writes, Tachlis hayediyah shaloi neda'acha. The ultimate knowledge is the knowledge that I don't know. In the Arizal, there's an expression, Reisha de lo yisyada. The head, on the top of everything, you reach the unknown. In Eitz Chaim of the Arizal, there's a portal called Shar HaSveikus, the portal of doubts. So I once heard from the Rebbe, he said, I asked my father, how can you have in the writings of the Arizal, Shar HaSveikus, the greatest Kabbalist in Jewish history, the portal of doubts? Doubts, Sveikus?
That's interesting, isn't it? You don't know what you don't know. And yet here he's talking about a great Kabbalist that had a book on doubts. Doubts. The one thing that holds a man back in life is doubt. If you can sever the link between you and your doubts, you can move forward. Let's see what he's got to say.
He says, the Rebbe said, my father, who was a Makubal Rebbe Levi Yitzchak, he said, told me there are sveikas that are inferior to knowledge, and there are sveikas that transcend knowledge. It's a different type of doubt.
Very elegant answer. Okay, so you're by the Rebbe, and you're being a chayzer by the Rebbe, and you get married, and you're still in that position. You're not
Well,
in
the
any-
Rebbe passed away when I was 22, so I was still a yeshiva bach. I was learning, writing. Obviously, it was a very painful period for a person like myself and friends and colleagues. I continued learning in yeshiva for years. I continued learning. My father, Zechron Levracha, started to lose his best Yiddish writers. He had people like Dr. Hillel Zeidman, like Bensi Goldberg, like Nissen Gordon. These were classic, real Yiddishisten who created Yiddish journalism, since the 1930s, and they were dying. And in desperation, I guess, he turns to me and he says, he called me Yosef Yitzchak, he says, could you write me a Yiddish column? I need a Sedra of the week. Dr. Zeidman passed away, could you write? I'm like, this is not my thing, this is nicht my fach. But he asked of me, and I started to write this weekly column in the newspaper, and then somebody started to ask me to give a shir Tanya in Borough Park, and a shir Gemara here.
Was there somebody who identified you and said you could do this?
No, I just, it was, and then one day I get a call from a rabbi in Highland Park, Chicago, a very fine man, and he said, I read your column in the Allgemeiner, and I love how you write and what your message is. Could you come over and do a Shabbaton? I said, you got the wrong guy. I don't do Shabbatons. I don't travel.
But you must have known that you could speak, that you had this gift of being eloquent.
I spoke in yeshiva, chaburas. I gave over the sichos and the maimarim and the shiurim of the Rebbe, but it was in that format. Okay. It wasn't, what you would call Mr. Lecturer or Speaker. So he says, I'll pay you a ticket. Come to Chicago, speak to my community. I said, I don't know what to say. He says, just say ideas. And then so I went. He paid for the ticket, whatever it was, and I spoke to the community.
Then it was economy stuff.
Yes, for many years it remained economy, for many years.
Yeah.
Until, I'll tell you how that changed if you want to know. And I gave, and I guess the Olam enjoyed, because the next week, a rabbi from Great Neck phoned me and said, could you come for Shabbos? So, things just started to develop. And just one thing led to another thing, led to another thing.
And what was your first formal posting, rabbinic posting?
My first rabbinic posting was in a shul in Crown Heights called Beis Shmuel. Before that, I was a Maggid Shir in a yeshiva over there, one of the yeshivas over there, Beis Medrash. I would give a shir Iyun and a shir Pekiyas in Gemara for many years. And then this shul needed a part-time rabbi, Beis Shmuel, so they asked me, and we began.
You never considered going away on shlichus, going out on shlichus? You were too busy in Crown Heights?
I considered it a few different times, but the workload was pretty intense, and I was seeing Hatzlach in my own way. And I love teaching.
Did you always have, forgive the question, and there's no premise to the question. If it sounds like it's an uneducated question, it's a lack of education on my end. Did you find that you had a unique ability for Lubavitcher Chassid to be able to talk to non-Lubavitcher Chassidim, be able to walk into, a lot of times people who belong to Zvet Chassidus their whole life, so to speak, they don't really understand the language of other places. You have this ability, today you certainly have it, that you could walk into virtually any community in Klal Yisrael and talk to them on their terms, and their nusach, and their lingo, based on their svarim. Was that something you always were able to do?
It's a great question, not offensive at all. I actually appreciate the question very much. And the answer to that is I always grew up with this spirit, I would say, of really appreciating diversity and understanding that Klal Yisrael, and really the world, is a rainbow. And Aruch HaMeretz Midur Rechavam Miniyam, the Torah is infinite. And there's a unique taste and flavor that you could find in each individual who is a unique reflection of the Rebbeinu Shalom, and certainly in each community and in each collective. I grew up in a home that was extremely sensitive to diversity. My father was a very colorful figure in his own way. He was a real journalist. He was a newsman. He loved press conferences, and he loved journalism, and loved politics, and loved
down
the news.
to the trappings of a journalist, the hat.
Yes. The hat and the cigar.
Right.
And remember, in those days, before the internet, before fax machines, before computers, it was typewriters. My father had typewriters everywhere in the house, and he had around 300 ribbons. People don't know what ribbons are today, but if your ribbon would finish in the typewriter, there was no ink anymore. So he had ribbons everywhere. So if there would be a war for 10 years, he would be able to type.
Even in the world of film journalism, he was a little bit of, he was a mechadish. That means he was ideologically, right?
Yeah, he was very unique, because you have to understand the world of journalism.
He was progressive.
You
meaning
could say
Lubavitch was, so to speak, would be a right-wing Hasidus politically, and he was left-leaning politically. Could we say that?
Well, in terms of Israel,
Israel.
and questions of Jewish identity and education, he was a very staunch.
No, I don't mean. I mean in terms of giving back land and peace and things like that. He was
No,
known
so
to be
actually,
more.
so he was quite a right winger. But the interesting thing about him, which you don't see, is that on the pages of his newspaper, he had a bunch of left wing writers, and he would not censor them.
Right.
He allowed.
Even though Lubavitch was from the
Yes.
most extreme in
Yes,
this.
because his newspaper.
Did the Rebbe appreciate that?
I think the Rebbe had a very deep appreciation for this.
Do you know if the Rebbe read the Allgemeine?
Oh yeah, that I know. That I saw many times. I saw that the Rebbe would sometimes come from his house with the Allgemeiner, and he would often give feedback to my
would.
father. Yeah, criticism, compliments, but feedback. I saw many times also when he met him.
It wasn't Lubavitch a party paper, per se, the Allgemeine, but over the
No.
years, when there was politics, it became a.
My father himself was a Lubavitcher Chassid. He was, I would say, a disciple of the Rebbe, or at least a very strong admirer of the Rebbe. But the pages of the newspaper were filled with all types of views. I mean, there was some very radical leftists who wrote there, and he would not censor them. So there was a very vibrant debate going on. And I also always admired, I could see him sitting with ideological opponents, and he would disagree with them, but never become disagreeable. Never be offensive or denigrating or insulting. It was always like there was an inner confidence that I don't have to delegitimize you in order to disagree with you.
And that impacted you.
We could really remain friends, and that was a great lesson. Great
You
lesson.
must have
growing
had
up.
your own curiosity because it's for you. It's not just that you don't get offended by other people. You have a real knowledge in the Hungarian Oberland I've seen you in Satmar, Kleisenberger crowds. I've seen you in Litvischer crowds. I've seen you in modern Orthodox crowds, and you seem to have an appreciation
Yeah,
for
so-
the Yerusha that each one of them have.
Right. So I always had that inquisitiveness and that openness. And it's extremely, from my perspective, it's very enriching. It's enriching when one can see the full spectrum of Yiddishkeit in all of its colors and all of its depth. And
Do you think that other people don't do that? Not only Lubavitch, other Hasidim are scared that their children will find out too much and like something better, so they don't expose them to it. Are we cheating our kids when we create a system, this is our way, so we're our Messiah, so we're not exposing you to other Svarim ways of thinking within Shulchan Aruch Yiddishkeit, obviously.
right. Well, I think it could come from two approaches. I think sometimes there can be an insecurity over there. But sometimes, I don't know if it's an insecurity, it may just be that, people are comfortable in a certain path and this is their comfort zone and this is what they know about. But I feel that especially in today's generation, people are really thirsty and hungry to be able to have unadulterated Yiddishkeit in all of its grandeur,
I think
in all
so
of its
too.
majesty, in all of its depth. And when they see that, it's very refreshing for them.
You think they didn't see it before today? Before this generation?
No,
You think 15, 20 years ago they didn't see it the same way?
No, you see,
I
We
think
we
now
weren't
there's
sharing the
much. I
message.
think
this is the point. You see, when you're a secular Yid and you think you're Jewish, of course you're Jewish, but you think you know it, and you know nothing, absolutely nothing. But you see, they're on the other side of the fence, and they know everything. Well, most things, a lot of things they know, but they don't know what we don't know. They know that we don't know anything. They look at us and they see that we're straight. One rabbi said to me, it was Rabbi Tatz. He didn't say it to me directly. He said it in a shir, and he said that Judaism is like an oak tree. The roots of the tree run very, very deep. Orthodoxy is going nowhere. It's dependent. It's solid. He said the problem is the leaves. The leaves are falling away. All right, and we can see that 80% of Jews just are assimilating. They're marrying out. They're not affiliated in any way with the shul or any group. They're just out there, no different to anybody else in society. No connection whatsoever with the Judaism. They think, because how dare you say that I'm not Jewish? I am Jewish. Of course, we're not saying that, but they don't. To them, they think Judaism is a bagel with smoked salmon on it. That's what they think. It's cultural. And it's not even cultural because it's all been diluted. You know what I mean? And yet, the orthodoxy is so involved in Judaism that they don't have time to reach out, except Chabad, the organisation that he's part of. They're like outreachers. They're what they call shluchim. They go out. They're ambassadors. They go out and they try to actually, wherever there's a Jewish community, they try to put Frumkeit into it. The services, Brit Milah, Bar Mitzvahs, Bat Chayils, Shabbat services, davening, tefillin. You know, how many times you walk past a Chabadnik and says, "Are you Jewish? You Jewish? If you put your tefillin on today," you know, that's what they do. They want you to do Jewish things. That's what they want. That's their mission, and that's been set for them by the Rebbe, who was their leader. If you want to call him a guru, he was like the top kiddie, and he was the seventh Rebbe. And there won't be any more after him. So it's an organisation now that's basically running on the steam that he put in place for them. The objective, the mission, to go out and create Jewish communities. And that's what they're so great. Now he himself is a speaker, and you're hearing his story, but he's got humour. He's got chutzpah with his humour, and he's very, very funny. But here it's a very serious talk, and very interesting at the same time. So I'm not going to prevent you from hearing it. So let's get on.
There's much more cross-pollination now. I think there is much more of people being exposed to other communities. There's so much more traveling, technology, of course.
Did you find things from other communities that you didn't know that refreshed you?
Constantly.
Like what? Who's somebody or a sefer or a person or a discipline or a thought that you said, wow?
I have to say, he's right about that. There's one thing that's basically collapsed the ground that existed between... You see, the guy on the right, the guy that's interviewing him, I think he's what they call Haredi. I think he is... He's not Litvish and he's not Hasidish. He might be a bit Hasidish, I don't know, but Haredi is God-fearing. The guy on the left, Rabbi Jacobson, he's also God-fearing, but he's Hasidish. In terms of the organisation, they have different approaches to it. But you can see how they can be respectful, but they are motivated by different ethos, if you like. One is more about the love and fear of Hashem, and the other one is more about the love and fear of Hashem. One has a bias towards the love, and the other one has a bias towards the fear, if you like. It's the fear that motivates one, and it's the joy and the love that motivates the other. They both work. You need both of them, really, if you ask me. Let's carry on.
Karlin tragedy just happened, Erev Shavuos, and I was inspired to open up a Beis Aaron. The next day I opened up a Beis Aaron. I learned Beis Aaron before, but it was incredible Torah.
Stalin.
The second, there was Reb Aaron HaGadol. The first Reb Aaron HaGadol was a student of the Maggid.
Right.
But then there's the second Reb Aaron, Beis Aaron,
Right.
which really is the one, the father of the one who put into a sefer the Chassidus of Karlin, of Stalin. Just an example, just of recent weeks, it happened after right
Anything
before
from the
Shavuos.
non-Hasidic world? Any Sfarim, approaches, writings, speeches that you said, wow, this impacted me, this is something? I never knew that.
Constantly. I mean, throughout my youth, I tried to get my hands on... my father had a lot of books in the house, a lot of sperm of different genres, and not all were, mamish the holiest of the holiest, I would say. So I had a chance to cruise through many different types of sperm, many different types of groups.
In Crown Heights, doing your thing, speaking your nusach, and all of a sudden there's a demand for your message. How did you get from there to Monsey?
So I was there. I was a Rav there for a few years, and then I really felt that Crown Heights is an amazing community, but it's one type of community. It used to be, the center of all the communities, but then there was a mass migration, so Lubavitcher Hasidim remained, but most people left. And I felt that my mission, or my shlichus, as you call it, would be more effective in a community that was filled with Jews of many diverse backgrounds, which would mean Chabad Hasidim, but many other Hasidim, and Yeshivish people, and Litvish people, and modern Orthodox people, and Jews of different stripes and different colors. And Monsey is such a type of community. So that was one of the...
So somebody
reasons.
came in...
No, nobody came, actually.
No, you just decided Monsey?
Nobody came. I did quite a few Shabbatons in Monsey.
Uh-huh.
In what's today known as Shiner's Shul or Chaim, I did some Shabbatons. I was here for different Yom Tovim, just as I did in many other communities. And I saw the energy, I saw the vibe,
And you
I
had
saw
a
the types
formal
of people.
position in Muncie, you're the Rav in China?
So when I came, I had no formal position. I just thought I could continue doing what I'm doing before and just live here. Not very, it's part of New York. So
A person has to pay tuition and bag of filter fish for Shabbos.
we have to pay tuition.
Gas in the car. this stuff.
Yes, by doing that. So I was still traveling and lecturing, and that was a source of income.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure,
How does that work? That means, I don't, what is the industry of being a film lecturer? They used to be in the Heim doing Magidim. When they finished, they passed around the hat. I think, according to legend, and people put in or didn't put in or took out even, how it, based on, I guess, where it was and the level of Magidas, how inspired they were. How does that mean? Was there ever a concept in the film world of paid lecturers before? And if a person's giving chizuk, is there a price on chizuk? If somebody needs chizuk, you can say...
It's a great question.
You know,
It's really
it's
a great
okay
question.
that okay.
Wonderful, yeah. In principle, we all know the Maimon Chazal, ma ani bechina, ma v'ata bechina. Not supposed to take a price for Torah. I didn't charge you for Torah. Don't charge anybody for Torah. Everybody knows the Rambam's opinion in Pirush HaMishnayos about rabbis taking salaries, about people getting money for learning or for teaching. We all
You see, that this is the thing. I must tell you very quickly. There's another rabbi, right, called Rabbi YY, same as him, but he's a Scottish Glaswegian rabbi, and he was very active on the circuit around the universities. He used to go and give lectures and switch secular yids on, right? Well, I know a couple of guys that were switched on by him, so that's how his name came to me. And when I was after my mum passed away, I was thirsty for it. I wanted to have a connection, and I'd heard about this guy's lectures, and I got in touch and went searching for him, and I found that he had a number of lectures behind a paywall, and it puzzled me. I couldn't understand it. How can you be charging for it? You're a rabbi, right? And then he said to me, he says, yeah, but you know, rabbis have got to eat. And it puzzled me. He said, of course they have. How do they make a living? And he said, I've got to feed my family. I thought, blimey, don't they get money? Where do they get money from then? And you know, they have to make a living. And I was a bit taken back by it. I said, Rabbi YY, if you ever hear this message and you remember the conversation, it's me. I was the one. But thank you very much. You basically did me a kindness, and you basically said, look, you said if you're thirsty for it at the moment. He said, have a look at this link, and he gave me, and it was TorahAnytime.com. And I went and listened to nearly every share on that site at the time, and I learnt a lot from it. You know, that was a good experience. But yeah, rabbis have got to eat. They have to have parnassa, they have to have an income, and great rabbis are in demand. You know, because they can move entire communities. And he's such one rabbi. Rabbi YY is another one. There's Rabbi Mizrahi in his own way. He, you know, gives out Mussar. Mussar is strict talk, if you like. You know, it's like severe. And it switches a lot of people off, but equally it switches a lot of people on. This guy is more, he's not as lenient, he's more about jolly, about happiness, like I said earlier on. So they're more what they call Hasidish. And they also can do Mussar. Don't get me wrong, the Rebbe did Mussar for sure. You read Tanya and there is Mussar in there. But anyway, he must get paid a lot, this guy. Some rabbis, I know there's a rabbi down in London, I think they pay him over £100,000 a year because he's in demand, they want him. My rabbi, for instance, is lucky if he gets 20 grand a year and a few gefilte fish balls on a Shabbos. You know what I mean? So there's a big gap. It depends where you are in your career. It depends on your charisma, it depends on your knowledge, it depends on how you can move a community. But the point that he's making is that you cannot, and you're not allowed to, charge for learning Torah. You can't. That's one of the halachot.
all know the Rambam's position. Subsequent poskim argue with the Rambam. However, that evolved in Klal Yisrael. It's a great question. Can somebody go give a shiur? Forget about a speech. Am I allowed to go give a shiur on any topic, or a daf yomi shiur, and get $100 for it? Get five? Well, it's a great question, and it's a great halachic debate over the generations, which is certainly a fascinating discussion. But I think that principle has to be maintained, even if you find a heter. You have to remember that in principle, you don't own the Torah.
It's a heter.
It's a heter. Ma'ani bechina.
Excuse me, sorry, there is In Mishnah Torah, there's a great rabbi called the Rambam. That's for another time. You might have heard me mention him from time to time. You might already know. Forgive me. But in his text, the Mishnah Torah, he basically says that one of the mitzvahs or the commandments that we have as a people when we establish a community, we have to build a school, we have to build a shul, a school, we have to hire a rabbi, and we have to hire a teacher to teach the children, and we have to collect money together to pay him. So there is a precedent there for maintaining figureheads, if you like, that are responsible for the delivery of Torah. So yeah, they do get paid, but it's wrong for me to sit down and teach somebody and expect a payment back. You can't really make money out of the Torah. I don't know enough more than that, but let's hear what he's got to say about it.
There's a sefer called Derech Mitzvah Secha by the Tzemach Tzedek. He was a grandson of the Balatanya. He tells a story there of a Jew named Reb Mendel Barer. Reb Mendel Barer was what you call today a Maggid, a preacher, a pontificator. He was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. And he was known as a Kaddish and a Heilige Yid, but he had a blessed mouth. And Tzemach Tzedek writes, Reb Mendel Barer used to say that he only gives speeches in places where they pay him. So you would think, he wants the money, but he wasn't that type of person. So they asked him why. He said, Pashat, wer bin ich zu sein a Sage zu andere Yidden? Who am I? Where do I have the audacity to give musar or rebuke or chastise or even give a message to another Jew who's a ben yachid of the Rebbeinu Shalom? Vu kim ich? Where do I come to have the authority to tell you how to live or to inspire you or to give you musar? He said, Elamai, if the people are giving me money, this means the Rebbeinu Shalom wants that this should be my keli, my vessel for parnasa. So then I have a heter to speak. But then he says, Shalach to shalach es ha'eim ves habonim tikach loch. The aim is the mother, the cause, the antecedent. The children is the result. He says, maybe I came to this city because I'm going to have a parnasa and I'm going to get money. But he says, don't get caught up in that. Shalach to shalach es ha'eim. Remember that essentially it can't be about that. And I think in my life, what I always, I tell myself, and I know that if I don't at least give as many speeches that people don't know about for free to people who need the chizuk, to situations where it's really not about money, there's no big organization, there's no big sponsors, there's no big donors, then something is off. In other words, if it ultimately becomes about making money, then ultimately I'm failing the people I'm speaking to, and I'm failing myself. So money is a component, important component, I would say, but you always have to, and I also have to have that perspective of, what it's ultimately about.
So
it's an interesting question. I wonder if he got paid for this interview, or if he could do it for free. I would imagine that he got paid for it, possibly to cover his expenses. They probably gave him a payment to cover his expenses to come along on account of the fact that although this is truly a business, it's a community thing. It's mishpacha, it's family. So he probably would have charged, but not with chutzpah. He wouldn't have been a ganaf with it, if you like.
Oh,
And there's quite a lot of invitations that I get, from people, individuals, situations where there's really
no, I know. I've asked you personally over the years to speak to people and to make time for people where there was only language nefesh involved, and for sure you've been very accommodating. I know that. So the answer is that this is really that role, is what you're saying of traditional. It's traditional Magidus in the sense that I'm funded by that, but I give myself as much as I'm able to be the Rebbeinu Shalom's, to that shlichus of inspiring Yidden and trying to sit with Yidden and listen to Yidden.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? I was sitting once at a meeting with serious people, educators, and they were saying that there's maybe a problem or an issue in the wider firm world where mediocrity rises to the top, so to speak. They said people learn how to work within the confines of a maisid or an establishment or an organization. They learn how to survive by not offending anybody and not being too creative and not being too original and not being too innovative. And this way they don't step on the wrong toes and everybody's comfortable and they go like this till they retire and they get a pen and pencil set and everyone says, Hatzlacha, brilliant career. They said, and we're cheating people because no one becomes great unless they walk off this, I'm doing it my way. And the example they gave was quite a They said, Rabbi Jacobson, just one day he said, I'm doing this my way. He landed in Muncie, and look, he's like a meteor shooting across the front world, inspiring people, doing it his way, and there's no precedent, and there's no organization behind you, and you're not associated with any VOD of anything. You're just yourself, doing your thing on your website and on your terms, and like you say, the invitations are there, and somehow you've managed, I think, to cross the length and breadth of the film world. What would you say about the premise of the question, which is that maybe we have an issue in letting people just do it their way and be as it pertains to yourself?
Wow. So there's the Even Ezra. The Even Ezra asks why Moshe had to be raised in an Egyptian palace. Shouldn't the first Rebbe of Klal Yisrael know what a Shalom Zacha looks like? An Upshernish, a Pidyon Haben, a Bar Mitzvah? Moshe Rabbeinu never saw herring. He never saw sponge cake. He never saw Wachnacht. Come on. The first Rebbe. That's the Even Ezra's question. So of course he says, Soid Hashem Lirei, if God knows. But then he says, I'll tell you two reasons. Reason number one, if he would have grown up among Jews, they would have not respected him. Ein Navi Be'ira. Every Yachna would have said, I remember your bris, I used to babysit. When did you become a Navi? Oh, when did you start hearing voices from God? That would be the end of Moshe Rabbeinu. The second reason, Even Ezra.
Where?
Rabbeinu Rambam, Parsha Shmos.
Okay.
And this is 1100s. This is not 2021. This is 12th century Spain. Rabbeinu Avram Ezra, one of the great Rishonim and poets and greatest commentators and philosophers in Jewish history.
What he was basically saying is that Moses was basically brought up in kingship. He was a prince, wasn't he? He lived in the household of the royalty. He would have been educated in royal matters on how to lead a society, how to participate in its administrative functions, how to go and fight a war. Indeed, I think he was a warrior of sorts. And he learned, I suppose, how to under nation under the wings of the Pharaoh, and he had a brother, his stepbrother, didn't he? And I think he's saying that if he'd have been brought up in amongst Jews, he wouldn't have had the respect, and I can see how that's true. And he's saying that there's a quote from Rabbi Ezra in Parsha Shmos from the book of Shemot in the 11th century, some kind of commentary. So that's what he's right. Let's see what else he said. Sorry to interrupt.
But then he says, I want to say a second reason. He says if Moshe Rabbeinu would have grown up among slaves, he would have developed a slave mentality. And he could never stand up and revolutionize the landscape of planet Earth. He could never stand up to the superpower and make a mapecha, make a revolution.
Yeah, we've got to clarify something. He refers to Moshe, to Moses, as the Rebbe of his day. The Rebbe, Menachem Schneerson, he was his Rebbe, right? He passed away about 20 years ago. But what Moses was more than anything was a Messiah. He was a saviour. He saved Klal Yisrael under the directive of God. God held his hand and brought him out with an outstretched arm, mighty hand. But Moses was a Messiah. He was a Mashiach, right, of his day. The first Mashiach for us, really. Let's see.
He grew up in an ambience of malchus, of royalty, of
Kingship.
aristocracy.
Kingship.
Such a person can change the world.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes many of us feel, that if we keep the people.
The other person who was brought up in such an environment like that was Joseph. He became the second in command of Egypt. He was like a king. Indeed, he has a staff. They call it the staff of Joseph. And Moshe had a staff. And Aaron, his brother, had a staff of the Kohanim. And there's a staff of David as well. I think David actually has the staff of Moses. I think it got carried down. Yeah, I think I don't know, but I think, let's see.
Down. We as a community will be more successful. And we don't let people flex their spiritual, psychological, physical, and emotional muscles to be able to become their best and deepest selves and change the world.
So we're not perfect in that respect.
And a few other things. And sometimes there's a real concern. We're afraid, what are people going to do with that freedom, with that expansiveness? Are they going to go beyond the pale? Are they going to go outside of Tchum Shabbos? In Russia, there was a Tchum HaMoshev, there was a pale of settlement. I don't want you to go out of that pale. And we understand that because Messiah for us is divinely precious. Right? Rabbi Lezer says in Gemara, somebody who says something not be pi rabbi, the Shechina leaves. We live thousands of years with a Rebbe and a Talmud, that are so precious. And yet, you look at Rabbi Eliezer, he's constantly saying things, not in the name of his Rebbe, but he said, Lo yamarti davar shelo shamatim pi rabbi, in Brachas and in Sukkah, many places in Shas.
Yeah.
And the answer, of course, is that Rabbi Eliezer heard in his Rebbe's words messages that other people didn't hear. He understood that the ultimate calling of Yiddishkeit is to be fully anchored in Shulchan Aruch, fully anchored in Dvar Hashem, not to be Mavater and a Kutzah Shel Yud.
But you're being Lamaschos really on the way we are. It's not so bad. That means
the Shulchan Aruch is the book of our law. It's all the crystallization of our laws, the reasons why we do things. If you've ever wondered why we do things, it's written down in the Shulchan Aruch, which was extracted from the Gemara and which was based on the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is on the oral law, and the oral law is on the written law. There's a parallel between the two. It's a massive endeavour, huge. But he's quoting the Shulchan Aruch, just to clarify things.
a nation that doesn't change. That's a big part of our DNA, is that we hold on, and Messiah is real. It's not. So at the same time, it comes from a healthy place or a place that needs to be. We need to keep things tight, but at the same time, there's a cost. Is there an answer? I guess what I'm asking then.
There's a big cost. The Sfasema says, "Schor yemois olam, binu shnois dor v'dor." Says the Sfasemes, medaf verstehen, shnois dor v'dor. The shinuyim, the changes of every generation. A message that worked in one generation may be completely irrelevant
Messiah.
and ineffective. Sfasemes knew about Messiah. But what the Sfasemes was saying, the Baditcheva writes, it says in Tosfos Yom Tov in 80 years, that Teku is Tishbi Yetaretz Kushis V'Boyas. Eliyahu Hanavi is going to answer the question. So the Baditcheva has, the Helika Baditcheva says, I don't understand. The Gemara says in Yuma, people just learned in Daf Yomi, Daf Hey, Moshe v'Aaron Imam. Moshe is going to be there. If you have a question in a Tosfos, do you go to Eliyahu Hanavi or do you go to Moshe Rabbeinu? Frag Badir.
Okay.
This is what it is. Tishbi Yetaretz. Ask Moshe Rabbeinu. Eken halacha. Why are you going to Eliyahu Hanavi? Eliyahu Hanavi is a great man. He's a malach. Moshe is the Rebbe of Klal Yisrael. Moshe Kibbutz Torah Messina. You know the Baditcher answers? After of a fella. It's in Kedushas Levi Lekutim. He says Moshe has been 3,000 years in Gan Eden. Eliyahu Hanavi has been around. He's at every bris. He's at every seder. He understands the struggle of a generation.
You gave me the sources. Okay, let me change the question a little bit. Okay. There's people in Klal Yisrael who work out of the establishment, and some of them have gone beyond the pale and taking pot shots at the institutions, the schools, particularly people like yourself. I know a lot of your time is given to listening to the pain of either children who have been rejected by the system or their parents, or adults who, as children, that's a big part of your message, comes from the Veitug, from the pain that you've heard and your desire to make change. You sit with a lot of victims of various kinds of abuse, and you felt their pain. At the same time, you're very much associated with the glory of the way we're doing things, that it's working. Either the system's working or it's not working. That's my first question. Is it working or is it not working? And basis, where do you see yourself? Which side are you? Are you in opposition, or are you in the coalition right now governing? Where are you? Are you with the team? Am
I with Bennett or Netanyahu?
Right. That means, where are you?
Okay. I want to tell you a little Torah I once heard from the Rebbe, from the Lubavitcher Rebbe.
I just figured out your trick. You just keep wowing people with the Torahs, and then they forget.
Listen to the Torah, and you'll tell me if it's an adequate answer to your question, and if I could have given a better answer. You'll be the judge of Israel. When you interviewed many people. The Gemara says in Menachos Chavtesam at Beis, Moshe asked the Rebbeinu Shalom to see a shiur for Rabbi Akiva. He showed it to him. Moshe sat in the 18th row. He didn't understand Rabbi Akiva's shiur. Chol shadaita. He felt horrible. Finally, Rabbi Akiva was in the middle of a yisoid, and the student in the front row said, Rebbe, haminayin lach. What's the proof? He said, Allah Moshe Messinai. This comes from Moshe. Messiah Vadaita. Moshe, calm down. asks the Rebbe and many Mefarshim, something is strange here. Moshe is the greatest humble man. Moshe Anav Moed Mikol Adam. It says he always felt that if somebody else would have had his koiches, they would have done better. Finally, here's your test. Rabbi Akiva is giving a shiur, and you know what? You don't understand what he's saying. He has reached greater heights. We should celebrate. Say, wow, amazing. Chol Shadaita. Why Chol Shadaita? What's the Chol Shadaita? And then he's quoted. Halachal Moshe Messina. Baruch Hashem. Thank God. Come on. This is my...
So the point here is that you've got Rabbi Akiva giving a lesson, and Moses is sitting in the audience, and he's listening to Rabbi Akiva. He hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. Just like many secular Jews probably watching this and going, what's he talking about? Going right over his head. And he gets to a particular point, and the Rabbi Akiva is challenged by another student, and Rabbi Akiva replies to say that the evidence is from Moses at Mount Sinai. And he quotes Moses, and he says, this is moments of fame. And this, in conversation with God, is God's basically saying, see, there's the evidence that that you are greater than him. But, you know, Rabbi Akiva was also supposed to be greater than Moses, you know.
You quoted me!
Rabbi Akiva, they say about Rabbi Akiva, he was the greatest rabbi that Israel ever had, right? And they say about the Rambam is that from Moses to Moses, Rambam was called Moshe Maimonides, right? So his name is Moses Moshe, right? And Moses Moshe. From Moshe to Moshe, there was none like Moshe. They're great rabbis.
I'm good. I don't understand the word. But the main thing is, what do they say? Write whatever you want about me, but spell my name right. Yeah? Something is off.
Good.
So the Lubavitcher Rebbe said as follows. Moshe knew that the Yesod HaYesodis of Torah is bittul to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Surrender to truth, emes. Moshe looked at Rabbi Akiva, and he saw the dazzling brilliance, the charisma, the courage, the creativity. Lo haya yedea, or Moshe couldn't learn. Everybody in the Beis Medrash understood, besides Moshe. Rabbi Akiva set up beside Reb Chaim, or Reb Griz, or Reb Shmuel, or Reb Nachum, or Reb Akiva Eger. Everybody understood. Moshe couldn't understand. Sorry, I don't get this. Lo haya yedea ma'olam means Moshe was disturbed by something. He knew that Rabbi Akiva is sharing Torah, but he didn't see that complete humility and loyalty and alignment with the Yesod HaYesodis of Torah, which is, I'm here to serve God, not me. And this touched him, it disturbed him deeply. And then Rabbi Akiva built some extraordinary, magnificent foundation. And somebody said, Rebbe, what's the premise for that paradigm? Rabbi Akiva said, Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now I have to quote Lubavitcher Rebbe in Yiddish. He said, Moshe das gehört to do that. Ah, Rabbi Akiva hat a Rebbe. Das hat a Rebbe. When push comes to shove, at the moment of truth, of emes, he says the yesod of everything, if you go deep down, it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Moshe says, this is emes, this is Torah's emes. And for me, it's what it's all about. I think every person needs to soar. Spread your wings and change the world in your own way, because every person has a contribution that nobody else could make. And when we crush that creativity, I don't think it's fair. And I think it's also a betrayal of our shlichus, because if Hashem gave a person talents, this is your light that you have to share with the world. It's not just we're not letting them be successful. I think we're depriving the future from their lichtigkeit, from their oil. But, and this is a profound but, each and every one of us needs to know that when somebody comes to me and says, what is this all about? Who's ultimately at the core of all of your teachings and all of your strategies? If my answer could be halacha l'Moshe Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu says, chazak.
Excellent. Very good. I'm curious about something. How, Bob Trepp is your Rebbe. You're grounded and you're basing yourself on what you heard from the Rebbe, and clearly you have a right. You spent enough time immersed in his teachings to actually be able to claim that you know what the Rebbe held. but the Rebbe's not here anymore. And a person needs a moral compass. They need someone to sit with, A, for inspiration. You're giving inspiration a whole day. You also need to go get inspiration. And probably you also have questions. So who's your Rebbe? How do you...
That's a great question.
Yeah, good question.
So there are people I constantly talk to or consult to, previous rabbis, Rosh Hashivas, friends, colleagues, mentors, people that I respect. And the truth is, different topics, I have to speak to different people and get their advice, get their feedback. And this is very important, you know, aseh lecha rav, knei lecha chaver, a person who needs mentors and needs friends and so forth. But I do say that I still spend a lot of time learning the Torah of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, listening also to his shiurim. They remain for me a very, very powerful reservoir of inspiration, empowerment, invigoration, and perspective in turbulent times. In terms of my own inspiration, this is a personal avodah that I have to work on every single day. If you know, a Hatzalah ambulance is taking somebody to the hospital, as I once told a Hatzalah guy, I told him, you got to learn a little bit every day. He says, I don't have no time, I'm saving people's lives. And I said, you know, there was a guy in Hatzalah and he was taking somebody to the hospital, and then the passenger said, there's no gas. He says, we don't have time to fill up with gas, we have to get to the hospital. If I'm not filled up with gas, I have nothing to give. So this is so true about every teacher, every communicator. People feel it. Sometimes you hear a speaker. I was once in a speech, and when the speaker spoke, not only was everybody sleeping, he himself, it looked like that he himself fell asleep.
It's right. We've had rabbis that come round on the circuit, if you like. We have them every year, and every year they come back and they give the same shir. It's the same one over and over again. You get to the point, I've heard it. You need new material all the time, or you need to be able to present an old message in a new way, you know. And I can see what he's like, a self-directed. He's an individual with the fire in him, like, and he's saying that all the kids out there, all the people, all the men, the women out there, you've got your own individual fire, and you've got to follow that where it takes you, if you know what I mean. You can't allow it to hold you back, because you're unique. You've got something to contribute into the world. You've got a gift that's been given to you by God with a mission. You've just got to wake up to realise that you've got it and go and implement the things that you need to do in order to fulfil that mission. He's got a mission. He's self-directed, and he doesn't have a rebbe. He doesn't. You know, one of the mitzvahs is to get yourself a rabbi, and the Chabad movement had their rabbi, their rebbe was their spiritual leader, if you like, and he passed away. There's another one to replace him. So they're feeding off what he used to say, if you like, and he learns and relearns the teachings of the Rebbe, the Torah, the commandments, the instructions of the Rebbe, and that's what he's saying. That's where he's coming from. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because somebody like him, he could be like a mini Rebbe, because he's got a following. Here I am following him. I'm not following him religiously. I'm just interested to see what he's saying, because he is considered to be one of the greats of our time on the circuit that he goes around. But it's within Frumish circles. But on the fringes, you've got people like us who are looking in and cholishing it. We want a bit of it, but we don't know what they're talking about, right? We're trying, we're hanging on to it, and we're trying to feed off it, and we admire them, and at the same time it's popular to criticise them, if you know what I mean. I don't like that. I'd love to be in those circles, but our positioning in life it's tainted. We have ways, we've acquired ways that would be frictious, would be friction with their ways. But we can acquire their ways. We can learn. We can embrace them. And their emunah, their faith is a lot stronger than ours. However, it is said that a tzaddik, a saint, right, a tzaddik cannot stand on the shoulders of a baalei teshuvah, somebody that's repenting, because the fire that exists in an individual, a secular individual that's decided to actually embrace God, to return to him, he has something, a desire for the truth, for the knowledge, for God, for the Shekhinah, finding Him, that they haven't got. And that's why there's a saying that they cannot stand on our shoulders. Remember that. Don't think anything less of you. You know less a person than they are. They just know Torah. Rub shoulders with them, because for sure some of it will rub off on you in a positive way.
He was bored of his own teachings. You know, when you're not inspired, when you're not stimulating yourself, when you're not challenging yourself with new ideas, and you get bored of yourself. Somebody once said, I think I'm bored, and it's with me. So I think this is a critical component. And it's true for everybody, for every Rebbe, Rosh Hashiva, parent, Mashgiach, Menahel, Rav, Rebbitzin.
I don't know if you've made the decision, or if but you're associated, let's say, I don't know if a movement is the word, but there's a certain shift that has crept into Klal Yisrael over the last few years, and a lot of the people who pass through some of the places you're associated with, we'll say it like that, are part of this change. It's what maybe in the yeshivas they call sort of a kumsitz culture. That means we can't talk a lot about Averis, we can't talk a lot about Gehenim. That way didn't work. Too many people are broken, so many people are scared. We're going to focus a lot on how much Rabban Shem loves every Yid and what it means when you put on tefillin, and we're going to make it easy for you. And also, there's going to be charcuterie boards on the side, and a hookah, and a guy playing guitar. People had a very hard time with it. A lot of people certainly felt very inspired by it, and people who weren't going to things before it certainly went. So I know that's a much bigger question. I'm curious how you view the phenomenon and your role within it.
Right.
Yeah, it's just becoming clear. The guy on the right comes from is Mussar, and with the teachings of the Ramchal, which is a very harsh approach to Judaism. That's they could be accused of, if you wanted to approach it from a secular kind of Christian kind of ways, fire and brimstone, if you like. Yeah, you're going to go to hell. That's what they're not like that, but you know, that kind of talk, if you like, works for some people. They're motivated by fear. They you know, if you say you're going to lose your job if you don't deliver 10% more sales, they get, wow, I lose my job. No, they get busy, you know. And then, but on the other side of the coin, you know, you've got there's the other side of the motivators, if you like, in life, of the pleasure seekers, those that are motivated by pleasure, like love. You know, God loves you. You know, which is what, you know, Yoski, you know, like God loves you. Yeah, you know what I mean? Their talk is about that, the Hasidic side of things. That's where Chabad are. You know, it's all about the love and the pleasure and the joy and the simcha, and be happy, if you like. And you know, if you say to a salesman, like, you know, if you sell another 10% more products this month, I'll give you a bonus of £1,000. Will you? Right. Oh. You know, he's going to get motivated by an extra £1,000. Yeah, I'm busy, you know. But if you said to him and use the stick, the fear element, if you don't sell another 10% more sales, you're going to lose your job. He's going to say, talk to me like that. Who do you think you are? I'm going to start looking for another job, right? But you know, the other side of the coin is that if somebody's motivated by fear, you know, if you don't sell another 10% or, you know, deliver 10% more productive, or you'll lose your job. They'll get busy for sure. But if you say to them, if you basically deliver 10% more in productivity, we'll give you another £1,000. We'll go right over the head. They're not motivated by it. So you've got to use the right kind of motivation on the individual. You've got to identify what it is that motivates them. You can't use fear on a pleasure-seeking person. You can't use pleasure on a fear-motivated person. It's similar to what he's just asked him. He's asking him that he sees that on the Chabad side of things, that you don't use fear on them, don't talk about them, you'll switch them off and we'll lose them forever. You know, he used to use the word kumsitz. Kumsitz is like ba-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, 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 you know, music and joy, and let's sing together. There are people that works on, and he's asking him about, you know, you've got a guy there with a guitar and a hooker smoking a pipe and everything, with a beard and a payot and everything, and, you know, and getting the music going, and they love all that, but there are some people that gravitate to it, and so he's asking him, well, he's asking about that scenario. I don't know what. Let's hear the question. Let's hear the answer. It's all right.
I could really ask you anything. You really don't flinch. You're ready for anything.
I don't listen, I think when we're anchored in Torah, we can address every topic. Somebody once asked me, is there anything that we're not allowed to talk about? And I told them, look, there's a Gemara in Chulin Kuf Lametes. Haman min ha-Torah minayin. Haman min ha-Torah minayin? We don't talk about Haman. No. If there's something in the world, istakel b'raisa b'raham. There's a Torah perspective. Torah has what to say about Haman.
So what do you say about this?
Haman min ha-Torah minayin.
Does it make sense? Comes as culture? Do you know what I'm referring to? This?
I think I know what you're talking about. And I think we have to address two dynamics here, and both very authentic. The Yisayid HaYisayid is the end of Kaihalas. Soiv davar hakal nishma, selikim yiravas mitzvahs of shmar, ki zeh kol ha'adam. Vayitzavenu Hashem lasas es kol ha'chukim ha'elu liyiras Hashem alekech, as Moshe Rabbeinu tells Klal Yisrael. The ultimate question I have to ask myself is, do I want to bring Yiddish Kindlech closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom, closer to Avos HaTorah, Avos Hashem, Avos Yisrael? That's the question. The Noam Elimelech, Rebbe Elimelech of Lezhensk, who was not part of the Kumzitz culture, although maybe the whole Hasidic movement was seen as a Kumzitz culture relative to the Lithuanian world, that's possible. But he writes in Parshas Koirach, he says something incredible. He says there's a Mishnah of a Metzia, Daf Yud, that if I find a Metzia, I find a diamond and I fall on it, and then somebody else comes, v'hechzik boy, he chaps it, the second person acquires it. So the Gemara says, why am I not koine it with Dalet Amos? I go into the 6 feet range of the diamond, it's mine. So the Gemara says, because he fell on it, Gala daita the benefila nichale de likna, but Dalet Amos like nichale de likna. This person shows, I'm not interested in the Dalet Amos formula. I want to fall on it, and that's why doesn't acquire it halachically, and if you grab it, you take it. So the Noam Elimelech says, and I quote, you can look it up in Noam Elimelech Kairach. Okay. And I think this is the most accurate and authentic and deep response to your question. He says, sometimes you find a neshama. It's a metzia. It's a beautiful neshama. But he says, like metzias, you find them in unexpected places. Matzasi David Avdi, says the magician's dime. Sometimes there's neshamas, he says, they go through a lot of challenges. There's a beautiful neshama there.
A neshama, a soul, you find an individual like who's got qualities, but he's in the wrong place, and he found himself in that particular place because of his journey that he's on in life. But of all the places you could find him, you found him in that place. But what a neshama, what a soul, that's what he's saying.
And then he says, comes a person and nafal Allah. A person falls on this neshama, he abuses the neshama, denigrates the neshama, shrugs the neshama further into the abyss. Then a second person comes, v'hechzik ba. He says he's mechazik the neshama. He lifts up the neshama. He lifts up the neshama. He shows the neshama how great it is. He says, the second person, zachaboy. You'll never imagine the schus of the second person who was mechazik the neshama. Frag the Gemara, come on, that's not the way. The way is Dalet Amos. What's Dalet Amos? The Gemara says, Meis mitzvah koine, mekayme b'Dalet Amos. Dalet Amos is the size of a grave. 6 feet. That's the size of a grave. Says the Nelch, you want to be kind to somebody? Tell him about Gehenim. Don't tell him God loves you and tell him how beautiful he is and what potential he is. Don't start helping him identify his traumas and show him his deep psychological potential. Tell him the emes. There's Gan Eden, there's Gehenim, there's right, there's wrong. And if you don't come back to Derech HaTorah, you're going to burn in purgatory. Dalet Amos. That's how you kind of. Says the Gemara, this is how the Rebbe Melech explains it. Kivan the nafal alei, goladaita, the benefila le nichale delikna, b'dal ramis le nichale delikna. Since this person is in a state of nefila, you should know that your Dalet Amos speech will.
A state of nefila comes from nephilim, fallen. It's down, it's depressed, it's in the pit, full of dreck. That's where he is. And, he's talking about now a neshama, somebody else going in and getting him out of the dreck, lifting him out. And and that you can't, when somebody's down that deep, you can't go and use fear on them, because what difference is it going to make? Let's see what else he's got to say.
Never be him kaina. And in his words, you tell him that he's going to die one day, lo chayesh lemissa. He doesn't care about death.
He's already dead.
He has friends who overdosed.
Yeah.
He has friends who committed suicide.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about death.
No.
You're telling him, be a mensch, be a man, make something of yourself. You're killing yourself with your drugs. I don't care. Death doesn't mean anything. To you it means something. To me it means something. To these kids it means nothing. The cemeteries are filled with their friends. These guys was like chayesh lemissa. You're not going to get him. He is so filled with pain and so filled with trauma. For him, death is relief. Don't you get it? Drugs is the way he escapes his pain. I don't have that trauma, so I don't understand it. I don't relate to it. I'm like, just be a normal person. Wake up in the morning. Be a mensch. Get a job. You don't have to be the Gadol Hador, but just be a mensch. Finish yeshiva. So says the Noam Elimelech, there's no way the Dalet Amos are going to be kind to him.
I have to say that I think that the way to deal with people, and they're often kids, some seniors as well, but the way when you've got children, young men, women, who are falling in life, that the way to help them, I think, is to change their location. You've got to get them away from the sources of influence. There's a saying in Judaism, if you want to change, if you change your location, you change your mazal. You change your look. And you've got to move. You've got to move. Sometimes you might see, if you ever go to shul often enough, you might see somebody who all of a sudden jumps from one space to another, and it's because he's got a shiver down his spine, and they're saying, like, there's kind of like a demon gone through you, walked through you, or a neshama that's trapped in him and it's walked through and it sent a shiver down his spine. If you can feel that jump to another spot 1 metre away, and you've changed your location, you're out of it. But there are other people that basically, I know that when I was a kid, and I went to Israel, and I went out of one pit into another. I went to a wonderful place, but on the kibbutz I was drawn to other kids like me. Birds of a feather, they flock together, they kind of come together, they gravitate to each other. You go search, and certain neshamas are directed that way, if you like. However, it was still a much, much better environment for me, but it wasn't a Torah environment, it was a secular environment. Had it have been a from kibbutz, for instance, an Orthodox kibbutz, I was ready for it. I took a black pair of trousers with me and a white shirt for Friday night. I was ready for Shabbos because I thought I'm going to Israel. I thought everyone keeps Shabbos there. I didn't realise it was such a thing as secular. I thought I was the only one secular person in the world. So when I went to the kibbutz and they were all secular, I was kind of relieved in one hand, but on the other hand disappointed. Had I gone to a from synod, from shul, from kibbutz, it would have been different environment for me, and I would have grown, if you like. I would have found my interest a lot sooner in life. You've got to change the right location. The other alternative, I think, is kidnap the kids, take them into a house with a cell on the windows and everything, make it like a prison, put them in there and lock them in. Lock the door, right? Adam and Eve went out to tea, locked the door and turn the key. Put a video in there or music and just beam the Rebbe for 2 months. Put food through the door every day. Deprive them of cigarettes. Deprive them of everything. Let them go through cold turkey and let them find God. That's one service we could provide, isn't it? Anybody interested in investing in such a service? So the wife could basically hire us to actually get the husband to stop smoking. He drives me crazy. He's always smoking cigarette, got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He's got ash everywhere. I can't stand it. It stinks and he's coughing all the time. He's going to die early, and I'm not going to have anybody to look after me in my old age. So I know I'm going to go and hire an outfit, and they're going to kidnap my husband and take him to a place, lock him in the cell and everything, give him kosher food every day, let him listen to the Rebbe, positive mental attitude stuff. He can dive in, we'll give him his tefillin, and we'll divide it. We'll kind of like, we'll participate, we'll do a partnership minion in some way, and we'll bring him out of it. We'll rub shoulders with him. We'll make your husband from, and he won't smoke. And how much is that going to cost me? $10,000.
Because look at him. He's so much nefila. Look at his lifestyle. The only way you could be kind to him is hechzik boy. You have to give him so much chizuk, and you have to hold on to him, and you have to remain attached to him.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel. This is, I feel, Dvar Hashem. People who cultivate this approach save hundreds and thousands of souls.
Yeah.
From depression.
I'd love to do that.
From addiction.
Yeah.
From the abyss, and sometimes from suicide. Now, are there people who utilized
for whom Dalet Amos would have worked as a Kenyan, but because of this wholesale approach of Hechzikba, they're losing it on the optimal Kenyan for them?
So I don't see this as a wholesale approach. I just have to say this to you. I don't see it as a wholesale approach.
One-on-one.
And those who may use it as a wholesale approach, right? I think they themselves often need that chizuk and mentorship and guidance. I know a lot of these people that we're addressing, call it the Kumzit style. And there's usually so much frustration and so much disillusionment. And people say, oh, just tell them the truth. Tell them to wake up and smell the coffee and grow up. Tell them to grow up. Here's the problem. We live in a generation where whether we like it or not, we can all deny it. But the trauma of 2,000 years has emerged to the fore of consciousness. Now you'll say we had Zaydis and Bavas. They weren't traumatized. Stalin was not a source of trauma. Hitler was not a source of trauma. The Russian czars were not a source of trauma. Khmelnytsky and Turkmenidze and Vespasian were not a source of trauma.
I think the problem with today's generation is that we're completely and utterly overwhelmed with information. Our minds have been tainted, if you like. I think in the earlier generations there are different kinds of fears, different kinds of worries. We don't have the kind of worries that they had. We just have to deal with the overflow of lies. It's all false information. What do they call it? Fake news. That's what they're dealing with today. Nothing can get through. There's a haze. Is there any room for Torah? If you block everything out except Torah and allow that to get in, you find there's a karma, balance. How do you do it? You've got to put your phone on. You've got to put it down. You've got to put it on make busy. You've got to switch it off, and you've got to get a chumash out and read it. And your mind will be going off in different directions all the time, because you've got the ADHD kind of thing. But over time, you'll find that the discipline arrives, and you can begin to focus. You're going to talk to a 13-year-old bachur, in their communities, and he'll give you a Devar Torah. He'll talk to you for an hour and a half, non-stop, like an expert on a subject at the age of 13. When we were 13 and we were having our bar mitzvahs, we couldn't even concentrate. It took me, I was learning bar mitzvah for 2 years. I only learnt it in the last week because the pressure was on, and even then I only learnt one line because I didn't have the power of concentration even back then. God knows what the kids can do today. Anyway.
Suddenly in 2021, with the prosperity that's unheard of in generations, with Toyameaz and Shalit Adin Fanaitim, with Pesach Resort, suddenly everybody's traumatized.
No.
Come on, right?
Good.
Great question.
Excellent.
So I could sit on a throne of judgment and sit in my cocoon and talk about the superficiality and the pustkeit of today's generation and wax eloquently about the good old days in Grodno and the good old days in the Altamir, the Mir I'm talking about in Lithuania, and talk about Baranovich.
Wait, that's not fair. Let's at least bring it over to Russia too. There was also Lubavitch.
Okay, Lubavitch.
And there was a lot of...
And Minsk, and Pinsk.
And Rostov.
And Rostov, and Liezhin, and Liadi, and Lyozhna, yes.
Bialystok.
Right. Okay, yeah, you can go on now. You can proceed.
We play fair, you know that.
Yeah, don't just no Baranovich alone. Yeah.
Well, you just did a beautiful article on Rabbi Chanan.
The magazine.
Baranovich was in my head.
Off topic. Davi Zafir wrote the article for us, one of our best. He wrote this article on Rabbi Chanan. The feedback, it was so empowering to know that people don't just care about Trump or whatever. They want to hear about Rabbi Chanan. They want to go through his map to America in 1938, and they want to revisit Memphis with him. It was a humbling reminder to me that you don't have to talk down to people. You can talk up to people. Sorry, yeah?
And Rabbi Chanan once said, Amiret Rabbi Chanan, his yahrzeit was just now, Yud Gimel Tammuz. He was shot.
80th yahrzeit.
80th yahrzeit, 1941. And Rabbi Chanan said right before the Petir, which was in the article, that we're all karbanis and we should make sure that there's no mum in us, there's no blemish in
Piggle.
us.
Shouldn't be piggle.
Those were his last
Ken
words.
Ratten, brothers in America.
Rabbi Elchanan once said, "V'shinantam levanecha." It says in Sifri, Rashi quotes, "Elo hatalmidim." So yes, why doesn't it just say "V'shinantam letalmidecha"? Teach your students. That's what it means anyway. It means teach your students, not only your biological children. And he says you would have missed the point. What the Torah is trying to tell you is the only way you can teach your students is if you see each student as a child, as a ben yachid. V'shinantam levanecha, my children.
Is your own child.
So, I don't see. When I am trying to bring out the goodness of somebody, I don't see it as a wholesale approach, because we're living in a time when the fact is anybody who's dealing with this sugya, as they call it, this sugya of OTD, of kids in pain, of addiction, of kids not fitting into the system, knows the truth. You are dealing with so much brokenness. And I could sit back and say, ridiculous. The Haksta Chainik, nobody is broken. They're manipulating all of us, all the therapists and all the coaches and all the rabbis in order to get a Kumzitz Judaism.
Nah, people are famished. People are famished. Kids are
I
famished.
wish you were right. But the fact is, after 2,000 years,
I'm famished.
I think, my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, it's part of the Simanim of Geula.
Yeah.
We were now given a mission to spit out from our system all of the untold layers of trauma.
I agree with that. After 2,000 years in exile, the Romans came along, they conquered the temple, they kicked us out, and we found ourselves wandering. The wandering Jew, and we've gone from one place. My mother used to say to me, don't, make sure your bags are packed, son. This is because they're going to come after us. One day we're going to move again. We're just guests in this country. We're just passing through. And that's the message that kind of came down my matrilineal line, you know what I mean, from my mum and my mum's mum and mum's mum. This is what they heard. We've always got to be prepared to move. Otherwise, why would she say it? That's what she said to me. That's one of the reasons why I decided to buy a property in Israel, because, if we've got to get up and go again, I'm off to Israel next time, you know what I mean? That's where my end result is, my end destination. I'm not going anywhere else. I don't want to go anywhere else. I have no interest in going to America. I have no interest in going to Ireland. I don't even want to stay here. I want to go to Israel. That's where we're supposed to be. That's where we're from. That's where we can be healed. We're a nation in exile. And we can get back there. We can get back to where we're supposed to be. And he said he'll gather us up. I think that started in 1948. The process is underway. I know that there are some people out there like Chabad, and those fellas that stand with Hamas. They I can't remember what they're called, but they don't believe in the modern state of Israel. Chabad love Israel, but they don't recognise it as a state on account of the fact that there's no reference to God in the Declaration or in the national anthem or anything like that. And indeed, they're saying that they can't really support Israel like the way the Zionists do until Mashiach comes, because it's Mashiach that's going to establish the state of Israel. And the point is that those that stand with Hamas, they criticise Israel and they have a go at everybody out there. They can't stand the Zionists, but when Mashiach comes, they're the biggest Zionists the world will ever see, and they will leave Hamas standing, and they will be over to Israel straight away to fight that war. And Hamas will be standing, where are you going? Where are you going? Bye! Do you know what I mean? That's the reality of the matter. Same with Chabad.
That has been paralyzing us for a very long time. In epigenetics today, they know that trauma is bequeathed through the genes, which means you can have a 13-year-old, a 16-year-old who's struggling, not because their father is dysfunctional or their mother has borderline personality, that too, or because they were molested or abused, that too. But it could be they're carrying something that comes from the Elta Zayda, from the Elta Baba, and they are forced to confront it. You are highly sensitive people who are dealing with a lot.
Let me ask it in a grab.
Yes.
You have a 55-year-old accountant in Muncie who learned in Torah Vadas. He's a very successful, functional, ehrliche person. He walks in every year, and the Chazan says, on the first night Slichas, his heart trembles, and he reaches for his Rabbi YY because he really wants to do tshuva. And now somebody said to him, why don't you come? the Rabbi Jacobson is doing a musical slichus. It's different because I should come, I go to my shul, okay, and he couldn't find parking by a shul, and somehow we ended up, you have more parking by you, whatever it is. He walks in, and there's 19 guitars over there, and the vibe of the room is, wow, it's like the best Purim Zoot in his life didn't come to this. He's never going back to hear Motzei Menucha again, and we forfeited that tremble in his soul for something. Maybe?
Great question. And you talk about the musical slichus. I think it's good to address
I'm
that,
giving you an
'cause
example.
That's a classic example of this. And I've gotten a lot of feedback over the years. And I just want to share that with you because I think it's important to see how things evolve. In my community in Muncie, I've seen Mitzvah Shabbos Slichus. Somebody once came over to me and said, prepare us for Slichus. Make a fabrengen before Slichus, which was the minhag by many Hasidim actually, that before Slichus, for a few hours till 1, they used to have a fabrengen where they would have divrei Eiros and chizuk. I actually, myself, just personally, I'm not judging anybody, the musical Slichus is not something that speaks to me. I like to have a Slichus which reminds me and is a replica of the slichas that I grew up with as a child, which happens to be by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where there was
a slichas. Sorry to interrupt. Slichas. My understanding of slichas, it's from the word slicha. It's to excuse us. It's to ask God for forgiveness. And I think it's when I can't remember. We come up to a certain festival, it possibly Yom Kippur, I can't remember, or Rosh Hashanah, and we say slichas every morning in Shachris, before Shachris. There was a series of. He's talking about there must be a style of slichus where it involves the guitar and singing, but it's quite. I mean, I used to have a colleague, a member of the minyan. He couldn't stand slichus. Every year he's like, found it so. You used to huff and puff about it all the way through. Couldn't stand it. He said it's the most boring thing out. But there are. I think it's I think it's in that. Yeah, it's coming up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur thing, is it? Because there's and I want to sing this particular bit, but the rabbis used to rush it, and I used to go, no, we've got to sing it. I want to sing it, and it goes Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanon, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emes, Noseh Chesed Le'Alofim. La 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 la. I can't remember it, but and that's in the middle of slichus. And I when you get to that bit, that's the only thing we kind of sang. And I used to say, why don't we sing this bit every single day of the year? And they said to me, it needs to be reserved for this particular time because that Adonai Adonai Hashem Hashem is the 13 attributes or qualities of God. You see, and I love it. I love it. I love the tune. I love the words. I love the. So that's what they must be talking about.
no musical slichas. At the end, they sang Rachamana Da'ani, Rachamana Da'ani, which was a beautiful, beautiful, heart-stirring old Chassidish niggin that was actually composed by the Rebbe's grandfather, the Rabbi of Nikolaev in Ukraine. So we had this beautiful fabrengen for a few hours. At the end, I announced, everybody now, I'm finishing 15 minutes early, 1:45, go to your minyanim, go back to your minyanim. And I went to my minyan, which was a very, what you would call traditional, conservative, b'maitzavei menucha kidamnucha tchila. However, I saw that there were hundreds of people who told me, they came over to me and they said, the only reason we're coming to slichus is because of you. Can we do a musical slichus? I said, Gesundheit, listen, you want to do Gesundheit. And therefore, every year I announce, everybody go your slichus. I do the fabrengen pre. But there are people who feel this is how they connect best to their souls.
And it's what?
Now, if it's something that...
I have to say, it's what floats your boat at the end of the day. It's what works that counts. And if it brings you closer to God through music, I mean, I love the singing. The singing lifts my spirit. If it brings you closer to Hashem, then so be it. But if you like the harsh, stern approach, and that brings you closer to Hashem, then also so be it. It depends on what works, but we're not in a position to criticise the other. That's the point. It's none of our business what works for the other person. It's what works that counts.
That's outside of halacha. Obviously, it should never be allowed. If it's something within halacha, does it become an obligation for clients? No, but I think just to delegitimize a person who may feel a much deeper connection in their own way, I don't see the value of it. And let me just say one more thing. That 55-year-old graduate of Torah Vadas, have an intimate conversation with him and ask him if for the last 55 years he ever felt a real love to God and to Yiddishkeit with a lot of serenity and tranquility. A lot of these 55-year-old people may tell you, my relationship with God is one of dread. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Elul are the worst days for me. All I wish is that they're over, because I know God is building a big Gehenna just for me and my sins. So I just want to say that for some people, that dread and that fear turns into a torment. And it's really a Yiddishkeit that is very, very restricting. Now,
it's not just that, they can't stand it, so they move away from it, which means they move away from God, they move away from Shul, they detach themselves, because it's so much easier to basically go and have a drink on Yom Kippur or go down McDonald's, and they basically sever their links and disconnect. I can't be doing with this, it's too much for me. Because they're not, it doesn't motivate or move them, right? I know loads of people like that. I remember when I was a kid, the kids doing that on Yom Kippur, they're off to McDonald's. I didn't go. I would love to have gone at that age. You know why I didn't go? Because they didn't have any gelt. They had gelt, so they went. I was lucky. That's maybe God, because maybe I would have been fresh in the tray for that age on a Yom Kippur as well. But the thing is, it's what works that counts. And if you've got, I'm 59, if you've got a 55-year-old man that basically is detached from his Judaism, is unaffiliated because of what he was told when he was a kid, that God's storing up penalties for you on the day that you die. Do me a favour. Don't want to hear it, and they walk away because they're more interested in talking about football. If you say to me, hey, have you heard the score between you got the Angels with the blue shirts and the Angels with the red shirts? The Yetzer Tov beat the Yetzer Hara. Who? The Yetzer team there, and it was the number 7 within the Yetzer Tov that scored a goal. How did he score it? You engage him in the football because he's into football. You can bring him in slowly through the back door, subliminally, closely, because whatever interests him is what you use as a hook to drag him in. Right? That's the way I see it.
There is a Shita and there's a Mahalach in Klal Yisrael that focuses very much on that kavan. For some people it's awesome and amazing, but just realize there's a lot of people who are suffering from a Yiddishkeit that they feel is very toxic.
I hear. This is my final question on this topic.
Okay.
What about the spillover message to the rest of the people? This is not associated with you, but over the last few years there's been a lot of purveyors of the idea of Kilo Averos really don't matter, and it's really not real, because you could always, if you would know what tshuva, if you know how much Hashem loves you, and if you know you fall down, get back up, it's okay. It doesn't really make a difference anyhow. So, Kaidem Achet, somebody is overcome by Taiva, it's a lot easier just to come when you know that could just really, there's an easy pass. I can go to Uman and say Tin Klali. I can give money to X, Y, Z. There's anybody ready to take your money for tshuva? And if worst comes to worst, I could really do tshuva. It's not that hard. Tshuva is the easiest thing in the world. Like one hero tshuva, one moment, etc. We gave this.
Excellent question. I would just say 2 points. Number one, every message, even the most glorifying and beautiful and most sacred message, can sometimes be misused. But the essential message here is not one that was neschadesh in the 21st century. Anyone who really studies all of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and all of his students knows that this message is repeated hundreds and thousands of times, and it's one of the fundamental yesodus of Pnimiyus HaTorah. And for the truth is, you won't only find it in Sifrei Baal Shem Tov, you'll find it by the Rishonim, you'll find it in Chazal, you'll find it in Sifrei Hagra, you'll find it from Reb Chaim Volozhin. In Chassidus, it became a very powerful and accentuated idea, but it's not a chiddush of Chassidus. Can people sometimes misuse holy, sacred ideas? Of course. But the fundamental idea is not that Averas don't matter. The fundamental idea is that your relationship with the Ribbono Shel Olam is absolute, it's non-negotiable, that at your core, that relationship is untarnished. So to the contrary, Averis is really an aberration from who you really are, and never think that just because you stumbled and failed, it really compromises or mitigates that essential purity of Itzumah Shel Yom HaChaper. Now I want to ask you a question, okay? What do you think would create a better and healthier relationship between you and your father and your mother or your grandparents? If you knew that your father and mother told you, listen, Rabbi Yisrael, or listen, Rabbi Yankel, or listen, Dvaira, these are the laws in the house. You follow them, you have a relationship with me. You don't follow them, you're done. Unless you come back and you repent, but till you repent, our relationship is gone. There's no love there, there's no connection there. Or you know that your father's love to you and relationship to you is absolute and unconditional, even if you do the stupidest things. And one last question. When you have a person who displays to you that unconditional love, do you think a healthy person says, wow, you're going to love me anyway, I have an idea. I'm going to take a dagger and drive it into your chest because you're going to love me anyway. And if a person does say that, don't you think they need serious help? When I give a message to people that your connection with Hashem is absolute and non-negotiable, even when you make a mistake, and He's always waiting for that ultimate alignment, and Torah and mitzvahs is not what makes you a child of God. It's because you're a child of God that He gave you Torah and mitzvahs. Do you think a healthy person would say, okay, let me just sin against this God. He loves me anyway. I think a person says, wow, if you are such a friend to me, I want to be close to you. I don't want to stab you in the back. And if a person doesn't say that, then they really need a Yeshua, then they really need a completely different type of treatment and help. I also want to tell you a word from the Holy Zidutshover, Reb Tzvi Hirsch of Zidutshover, who was known as the Sar Beis HaZoyar. He answers a question of the Gemara says in Rosh Hashanah, the Yud Gimel Midas Harachim, the 13 attributes of Hashem begin Hashem, Hashem. Why twice? So the Gemara says, Kan koidem shechata, kan lacher shechata. Before you sinned and after you sinned. So the Rosh says, why do you need Midas Harachim and before you sinned? I understand compassion after you sinned. Why compassion before you sinned? So the Rosh says, Hashem knows you're going to sin, so He needs compassion even before. The Zidutshover says, it's a real Chiddush of art, I have to tell you. Before you sin, you need a different type of compassion. Compassion for your arrogance, for the feeling of holier than thou. Me? He says, before I sin, you need a different type of rachamim. The rachamim that allows you to be human, vulnerable. The rachamim that allows you to open your heart to people who are broken.
Rabbi, here, could I respectfully disagree or ask a question? It's not chas v'shalom, my place of business. It's a question. Sure. I'm a father of children. I think I have a nice relationship with my children. I would hope that they would want to listen to me. There's a big difference of how I would warn them not to go out of bed after bedtime. You can't have another drink, to how I would warn them not to play with matches. There's a very big difference. For the first one, by not going out of bed, I would say, please don't go out of bed. And if they came out and said, Shefel, please go. I asked you so many times, you're really great. You're the greatest kid in the world. Because it doesn't really make a difference to me that much. How much they violated, it's just a question of my own convenience. If they were playing with matches, or if I was the sort of person who kept guns in the house, or anything that has the potential to really harm them and change their forever, chas v'shalom, I would probably not say, Shefel, please don't play with matches. I love you anyhow. I wouldn't do that. Yeah. We're dealing with chait. Maybe severing, maybe chave creases, maybe things that can really impact the person's forever. Who says that just because I like my father better, that's the right way? You're playing with fire.
Right. But what if it's exactly the opposite? What if my only hope to have this child, this youngster, seized from the Chayavi Krisis and Mrs. Besden
just to burn himself?
When they feel wholeness, because there's so much brokenness in them for whatever reason. I want to tell you a story. A boy came over to me after a lecture. I gave a shir about Shabbos. The last 20 minutes I spoke about the beauty of Shabbos. He came over to me afterwards and he says, I wish one day I'll be able to keep Shabbos. I wish. I wish one day I'll be able to relate to your words. I said, you didn't relate to my words? He looked at me. He looked if anybody was watching. It was private. And he says, how could I? When my molester chose Friday night in shul, after everybody left, he knew that Friday night nobody stays in shul because everybody goes to have a Shabbos meal. And that was the opportune time to utilize my body to be able to satisfy his demonic impulses and instincts for 3 years every Friday night. He says, I cannot keep Shabbos anymore because for me the word Shabbos triggers the deepest.
It's a trigger.
Now, I listened to this story. I watched this boy. I could tell him, do you know that in the time of Besdin, if you would be Mechalel Shabbos, and there was Eidim and Asra, and I could describe to him the Mishnah, Masechta Sanhedrin, everything that they would do to him. I can do that. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, no good.
You think I'm going to get him to keep Shabbos the next Shabbos? or he's going to look at another rabbi who's protecting the perpetrators and the abusers and doesn't even understand the depth of his trauma. You know what I did? What the Naim Ali Melech says, the Mishnah of Metzia Hechzik boy. I just held on to him. I held on to him. I literally embraced him. He put his head on my shoulder and he started to cry. He started to cry, and he said, one day I'll get there. One day I'll be able to keep Shabbos. Yes, when we are talking about a very wholesome situation where my children feel connected to me, where they have the 4 S's, they feel safe, secure, seen, and soothed, where there's deep attachment and deep connection, where their identity is solid and powerful. So mensch, there's a person who feels their own value. Yes, you are 1,000% right. You're not disagreeing with me because I agree with you 1,000%. But when I am facing a person, for whatever reason, is zerbrochen auf Sticker, their heart is torn in 1,000 pieces. There's no person there. There's no self-value. That's why they're numbing themselves. They're escaping their pain. They'll say, I'll do anything, but just get me out of my body. Get me out of my consciousness. My brain is too scary. And they'll do anything to numb themselves. When I'm talking to that child, I speak about Chris's and Mrs. Besden. Great, I wish. Skila Srei for Herek Chenek, which is the fastest Misa. Take me to the gallows. That's what his own best friend did. That's what he saw another girl do.
Rabbi Jacobson, I'm grateful for your time. I'm grateful for your passion. I'm grateful for your eloquence. The bunch should give you kaiches. It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for coming again.
Thank you.
Marvellous. You know, my final word on it is, when a child has got that kind of trauma going around their unconscious mind, and the thoughts associated with that trauma keep floating to the surface, coming into consciousness, the only way to help them is to teach them prayer. Because prayer is a form of self-instruction, which basically gets the consciousness to basically override the trauma that's in the unconsciousness. And the ultimate objective really is, if you can draw an analogy, that the unconscious mind, where the trauma is like a managing director, and the consciousness is like a manager of an organisation. Strategically, the unconscious mind, the managing director, will tell the manager what to do, and the manager will implement it, if you like. That's the nature of the conscious and unconscious, slave and the master, if you like. This is the master, this is the slave. This is where the Yetzer Hara resides, and this is where the if you like, the Yetzer Tov resides, in my personal opinion. The objective is to get the Yetzer Tov to tell the Yetzer Hara what to tell the Yetzer Tov to do. The objective is to get the manager to tell the managing director to tell the manager what to do. You've got to override that unconscious thought of trauma. You've got to basically realise that a stronger emotion tends to replace a weaker one. At the moment, the emotion of the trauma in the unconscious mind is powerful. The only way that you can overcome it is not to, because you'll never make that, you never reduce that thought or that trauma in size to a smaller size. The only thing that you can do is increase the size of a thought in the consciousness and make it bigger. Because a bigger thought, a bigger ganglia, a bigger neuron, a bigger angel, a bigger Yetzer Tov will overcome the power and the size of the Yetzer Hara of the trauma. I hope that makes sense. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Give me some feedback on what you thought about this interview. Did you understand what they were talking about? Did my commentary help in places? Do you want more or less of the commentary? What kind of audience are you? Are you secular Baalei Teshuvah? Are you from birth? Are you coming at it from a 10 years Baalei Teshuvah? Give me an idea of where you are in your life journey, because it'll help me to actually tailor the material for the subsequent videos. And and ask me some questions on anything that you need cleared. Don't forget, I'm not an expert. I'm just on my own journey, and I like making videos. I like talking, as you can see, and the Rambam says I should do less of it. But I like talking, and I like identifying the differences and the similarities between the different segments of our tribe, or tribes, if you like. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Speak to you later. Bye.